I often get accused of having contradictory things that I believe or that I say, right? Or people get upset with me that when I talk about reality, I talk about multiple opposing viewpoints or multiple opposing realities, right? And they believe that this must cause me some kind of cognitive dissonance. Like, for example, when I say that there are genuinely two different moral viewpoints on the abortion issue, they will get mad at me and say, well, how can you not take a stand on my side of the issue? How can you not stand against these baby killers? How can you not stand for women's rights? How can you? Well, that's exactly it, right? That's exactly it. I'm not here to satisfy you. Maybe you like the fact that I allow for ambiguity and contradictions in what I think and what I say when it comes to things like this, right? Because the way I see it is like this. I'm standing here with no direct vested interest in this abortion issue, right? I have my empathy and my intuition, and I can try to follow that to some sort of conclusion. But even that is guided by and mediated by what I've been exposed to. Your empathy and intuition is to some extent inherent in humanity, in the human psyche, but it is to a great extent conditioned and ideological. Your intuition is based on your subconscious, which is influenceable. And it's not just this arbitrary social reality. A lot of people go by whatever's convenient for them, right? Whatever my girlfriend thinks, whatever my mom tells me, or whatever my friends think, this is reality, and, everything else is just fake. Just throw it out. Which is stupid, right? Because where do you think they got it from? Do you really think they just came up with it? I mean, if they did just come up with it, it'd probably be even worse, right? But no, they probably got it from the TV. They're probably regurgitating slop from the TV into your mind, right? And so you have to think, like, what actually is reality? How do I actually get to reality? Because it isn't just what my friends tell me. It isn't even just what my political circle or political sphere tells me. No, it is not. It is not. And we have to ask ourselves, when I take a stance on an issue in one way or another, what is going to be the real and objective effect in the world of doing so, right? So even if I were to take a stance on the abortion issue, what would be the real effect of doing so? Well, the effect would actually be, a few things, right? I'm speaking to an audience. Now, in my personal life, in my personal capacity, if I take a stance on this issue, what is the effect? What is the effect? Generally speaking, right? Generally speaking, when it comes to real life, I will just entertain what the other person thinks about the issue, right? I'll just listen to their side of it. And I'm not really going to push back too much on it necessarily, because at the end of the day, what me and this person thinks about the issue, it's not going to change the reality. It's not going to change the policy. And where's my vested interest in changing this policy? Right? Where's that? So I ask myself, what is the real effect of what I'm saying and doing? Because I don't have a pretense of knowing the full truth and the full reality. I don't. And when I take a stand on something, it's oftentimes not because I believe that I have the one and only truth. No, not at all, not at all. It is because I believe that the truth lies somewhere between what each side of something is saying, and I hear only one side of it coming from people, and I want to speak the other side. I want to deliver a message with the other side of things. So I understand that by saying what I'm saying, I am not speaking to some objective, universal reality, because there is no such thing. But I also don't believe that reality is simply subjective and that it's the sum of all these tiny experiences. No, none of these things. None of these things. In fact, I think that the very concept of reality itself as an object, a metaphysical object, right? Like maybe we understand that on some level reality is a four-dimensional object, right? And that we traverse it in three-dimensional space in linear time, and that we're going through this sort of static object, you know, and that you could consider everything that happens ever to be part of this four-dimensional object, right? But then you have to ask the question, where does my speech and thought lie within this object? Where is my participation in this object? Because as much as you can picture reality in your mind, as much as you can think in terms of space and time and try to weave everything together, ultimately what you've got is an electrical process, a chemical process, right? What you've got is something that has all of this freedom to exit reality, has freedom to exit reality, right? And that's why the deep state loves fiction, because they understand the human capacity to exit reality in a convincing or enticing or compelling way, right? Is the capacity of the musician or the fiction author. And so they want these people to have a very narrow view of reality. If you ever listen to interviews with actors, for example, many of them are very, very isolated, because in order for them to play a role that works well with the way of things, right, they just have to follow whatever instructions they're given. They have to lead the American imagination in whatever direction is given. That's how it works, right? And by doing these things, they will maybe claim that they have the ability to understand universal truth, and that this fiction is a reflection of some universal truth, the same way that maybe, a book like the Gulag Archipelago is reflecting the real truth, or whatever, right? They're going to claim this stuff. But we all know that they don't have the real truth, and we all know that internally they understand the exact same thing that I do, which is that we are participating in a reality, not that we have the reality. You can't have this reality. You can't. And the thing that bothers me extremely much is when people think that they have reality. It bothers me to no end when people think they have the one reality. They have the one reality. Now, we have things that are objective, like computers, math equations, science. The human brain has the capacity to behave objectively. And objective thinking is based on objective behavior. For example, when I'm playing a guitar or piano, I become objective because the instrument has its own laws, and I start to understand those laws when I play the instrument, right? And if I violate those laws, I immediately know that I did. And so when I'm playing an instrument, I'm thinking in an objective way because I'm dealing with a hard matter such as this, right? When you're doing your job, when you're doing work, you're dealing with things in an objective way. You have to do your job correctly. If you don't do it correctly, you're going to hopefully learn that you did something wrong and correct your behavior. But when it comes to discourse and discussion, then things are a little bit different, because just because I'm getting negative feedback, right? If I'm getting dissenters, people don't like what I'm saying, whatever, does that mean that I have done something wrong? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Not at all. Negative, positive. It doesn't matter how it makes me feel, right? If anything, getting a lot of negative feedback from saying something that I believe is true, not in that it is this objective universal truth, but in that it is bringing people's thinking closer to truth compared to how it already is, then I know that I've touched upon a difficult and important matter, and that I probably am going to be changing minds, and that I am going to be getting a high level of attention, hopefully, for what I'm saying. That's the goal. That's the goal. So, overall, I understand people have the capacity to be objective and scientific, right? I'm not saying that everything is just subjective. But when it comes to discourse and media, it seems like people make the mistake of thinking objectively about things and inserting themselves into this sort of thing, right? So, like, if you call me bald, for example, right? What is the effect of me being bald? Does it discredit me in any way? Does it discredit my message? No, no. Now, maybe it will make some women, or young women especially, less likely to want to watch. Maybe it'll make them more likely. I don't even know, right? I don't even know what the objective effect is. And so if somebody insults me by saying, oh, you're bald, you have no hair, right, or something like that, I already know not to take it personally, right? I already know it doesn't even bother me in the first place, right? But a lot of people will hear something like that, and they will think, oh no, I've done wrong. Well, no. What you've done is had some thought that goes against what people are already saying and what they're already thinking, which is based in what? It's based mostly in TV and media and culture and just these, viral ideas, things that people like to think, right? That's what it's based on. It's not based on reality itself. Now, if you contradict someone's objective experience, like, for example, if I say that a guitar is typically tuned, like EAC GBE, that's wrong. Guitars are typically tuned differently than that, right? That's a different case. But if I go around saying, this or that thing about, communism, for example, and it gets people upset, it's not contradicting their objective experience. It genuinely isn't. Right? It genuinely isn't. And we also have to remember that the way in which the social experiences, the socio-political experiences are mediated is by ideology. Because when you simply have the experience, the memory, you remember how it felt, right? You remember what happened then and there in that moment. And maybe it was something kind of undiluted by ideology. But when it is translated into a memory, we simplify it, right? And we comprehend it as something. And ideology transforms that real experience, that immediate experience as it happens, into something else that we interpret. The things that happen to you are interpreted and mediated by ideology after the fact. They are only objective in the sense that we are bound to the objective things that happen. Like, for example, if you're living in a socialist country and you're reading a lot of Western press, which is denouncing your country, you're going to think you're having a bad time. It doesn't change the fact that you have free childcare, but you're going to maybe distrust the government for giving you childcare. It changes things, right? It changes things. And if you no longer have it, instead of being, grateful that you had it and wanting it back, you might not actually want it back, even though it made your life better, even though it did something good for you. The exact opposite can happen to me, right? I could start to believe with the right ideology that America's global interventions are a good thing, right? That they're a good thing, that we're helping the world, that we're making peace, we care about human rights, and all of this stuff, right? It's all mediated. And I suppose that in that case, it's not an objective experience unless I was actually in the U.S. military. And that's why I like to listen to people that are ex-military, because they have that, to go off of. They have that to go off of. So overall, my point is that, you need to stop expecting me to have reality itself. I don't have reality itself. Nobody does. Stop trying to appease other people with your thoughts and opinions and assuming that what random other people think about something that they have no direct objective experience with, stop thinking that that has any meaning whatsoever. It doesn't. I mean, it has some meaning, right? You can figure out what the meaning of it is, but the meaning is not what the words themselves imply. right? That's not what the words themselves imply. Instead, it's based on a more personal relationship and a relationship to these media machines, to what they consume, and to all of this. It's not based on just what they themselves think as an individual truly. And there's a myth of individuality that we tell ourselves, that I, as an individual, if I think something, innately in my mind, because I have a high level of intelligence, right? If I think something, it must be true or valid or true for me, right? It's in my world, it's true. Well, this is completely ignoring the question of what it is that made you think this, right? If I was like a baby, say you have a baby that's never exposed to reality in their life. I have no idea what this baby would be like, but I doubt that they wouldn't just know what an apple or an orange is if they saw it, right? Everything would be new and confusing to them, right? We are not standing outside the world like that. No, we are in the world, and the things that happen to us, the things that we're exposed to, even subconsciously, even a TV that's on while you're walking by, it's going to change the way that you think and act. You need to be aware of that, right? If you go around the world and you engage in a constant process of mindfulness, right? Thinking about what's going on and how is it affecting me. Not a deep thought, just a relaxed thought. What is going on and how is it affecting me? And you go around seeing things this way, calmly. That will bring you closer to reality. That will bring you closer to reality. If you go around afraid, right, because of your ideology, or if you go around, trying to interpret everything, right? You're trying to interpret everything as one thing or another, trying to simplify everything. You forget the momentary experience. Your senses themselves, you don't experience them. You don't hear the words that you're hearing, even, right? Everything is transformed into something else immediately. And you will ignore the things that are actually influencing you in the meantime. That is how you can get closer to reality, and by engaging in objective things. Why do you think old people with nothing to do get sharper and smarter in every region of life when they solve crossword puzzles? Why do you think this is? Because nothing else in their life is forcing them to think in an objective state of mind, right? So everything that you do, even video games, that brings you to a more objective way of thinking is going to help you with understanding reality itself. Now, if you want to understand matters in themselves, right? I want to understand political movements. I did want to understand them, right? Now, in the process of engaging with these movements, I ate the dog food, right? I believed whatever the organization believed. When I was in the IWW, I mostly believed what the IWW believes. When I was in PSL, I mostly believed what PSL believes, right? Right now I'm in CPI. I mostly believe what people in CPI believe, right? And so you could say that I've been eating the dog food of these different organizations, but really, it's more that I had a certain thought process which drew me towards other things that mirrored it, right? And that thought process itself was influenced by its own things, by social media, but also in large part by my own personal experience. And by engaging in these orgs, I learned the true meaning of these thoughts. I fleshed them out. I reached the conclusions of these things, right? Because ultimately, it is not a sin to be guided by the things around you, because that's the only way we know how to live, right? It is not a sin to believe something that's wrong and to follow it to its end. Necessarily, right? You don't want to be following things to destructive, self-destructive ends, right? But you need to follow it to its end, right? If you really do believe it, you need to follow it to its end. You need to figure out who else believes the same things. What are they doing? What are they capable of? What is the end point of this ideology, right? With PSL, the endpoint, what is it? It's a circle. It's the movementism, right? We protest, we pat ourselves on the back. We protest, we pat ourselves on the back. We educate ourselves with what the people on top do, right? These are people, they own the carousel, and we're the ones riding it, right? Brian Becker, he owns the carousel. PSL members are the people riding the carousel. That's the endpoint of PSL. It's a carousel, right? It doesn't really, it grows a little bit, it shrinks a little bit. Mostly it just exploits people who are dissidents, right? And gets them to do some work to promote PSL, to whatever, right? You get on, you get off. It's a revolving door. And I learned that, right? Through my experience. Now, it did help to have other people point that out to me, right? It helped a lot for Caleb Maupin to point out the Marxist tendency for me to realize what was going on, but I already knew what was going on, and I probably wouldn't know what was going on if I hadn't actually been part of that organization, right? So if you want to know something, you have to go figure it out. Why are people so stupid? They think, oh, libertarians are just bad people, or MAGA people are just bad people. Okay, well, have you talked to them, right? And when I say have you talked to them, I don't mean did you just go and immediately challenge their most closely held beliefs. No, I mean, did you actually try to figure out where they're coming from and guide them through this process, right? Because you can guide me through the process of why I think what I think, why I do what I do. I can explain all of it to you clearly, right? Maybe not all of it. Maybe some of it I still need to figure out. I still need to work out. Some of it I might not need to work out, right? Why do I have to work out why I like to eat sweet candy? It doesn't matter, right? But there are things that people are guided by, right? That move them. And these are things that people may or may not really be aware of, but they know, right? They may not be immediately aware of. They may not be aware of the total effect, but of pieces of it or little things, right? And when you talk to them, you figure out what motivates them, what guides them, where they're coming from, what they hope to achieve, and all of this. And what you're going to learn is that most people are fundamentally the same. We want the same kind of things as each other, right? We want to live happy, peaceful lives, right? We want to be rich, or if not rich in the material sense, rich in a more spiritual, personal sense, having lots of, friends and all this, right? People generally want the same kind of things as each other. We're all kind of the same. It is only through ideology that people learn to mediate each other as whole human beings through the lens of a category which revokes their humanity. Now, there are ideologies that draw people who are fundamentally lacking in humanity to them, right? There are ideologies which may be telling that somebody is not the best person. But you cannot simply assume until you have actually talked to those people, until you actually interact with those people and build those bridges. And if you don't do it, if you don't talk to them, if you don't figure it out, then you are a crank, right? You are a crank because instead of speaking the truth, instead of thinking objectively, you are speaking in a way that's mediated through ideology which collapses reality into a single reality, generally speaking. Every ideology has open doors, right? Every single system has undecidable problems within it. Even math and its objectivity cannot really figure out the meaning of dividing by zero, right? There's always going to be limits to a system of thought. And so when you occupy a specific system of thought, you have to have a system of thought that recognizes its own limits cyclically, and only then can you ascend to a higher level of thought. And until then, you are on the baseline ground where you may perceive some realities, but you can't raise yourself to a higher level. And worse yet, you cannot unify diverse and divergent groups of people into a single goal, into a single meaning or a single message. You can't do it. You're stuck down there. And if you're stuck down there, I want to bring you up here. I want to bring you up here. Dialectical materialism is not the only ideology which enables people to comprehend itself, right? And which encourages us to spiral upwards to a greater, higher level of thinking that can unify people who don't necessarily agree with dialectical materialism even, right? It can encompass things outside of itself because it recognizes its own limits, right? It is not the only way of thinking that can accomplish this, right? But it is a way of thinking that has enabled me to accomplish it for the first time in my life, right? Before I understood dialectical materialism, I was stuck on this baseline ground and I couldn't escape. I was bouncing between this and that idea, just struggling to make sense of the world, grabbing onto anything that I could for a momentary clasp of sanity until I flesh it out to the point where I realize that this is yet another fake sanity. This is yet another ideology with limits that prevent it from reaching a higher level. So remember this, right? Remember this. And all of these things, this is what Mao taught me. I recommend reading Where Do Correct Ideas Come From? On Practice and On Contradiction. Mao explains these things very concisely, very poetically. It's a short read. It's a short read and it's a wonderful read. It took me years to fully comprehend the meaning and importance of what I had read then. So if you want to fully understand what I'm getting at, I recommend you read those works.
This has been Hertz from Bismuth. Remember to like the video if you like it, dislike if you don't like it. Comment if you have something to add, maybe I missed something. Subscribe for more, and share this video around so that other people can get the message. See you next time.